How you doing? Nice to see you,
I'm
Jason.
good. Yeah, it's good to see you, Alberto. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I was practicing my drums a little bit.
Well, hi everybody, and welcome to our conversation with Alberto Nacif of Aguankó. My name is Jason Dake. I work here at the Dennos Museum Center, and of course, I'm backstage. Actually, I thought it would be a nice place for us to host this conversation today. With that, we're going to have a brief conversation with Alberto, a little bit about his music and his background, and we hope that you'll enjoy the program and, of course, come to the concert on January 8th. And you can find information about that on our website at dennosmuseum.org. But Alberto, thank you for being here. How has the last couple of years been for you, as a musician?
Well, the first year of the pandemic, we had quite a few of our engagements canceled, obviously, including one with you that we discussed and thought that was the safest thing to do for people out there. But in the last 6 months, things have picked up quite a bit for us. We're quite busy. We're playing 2 to 4 times a month. We're starting to travel a little bit. So it's been good. And the musicians, of course, were quite ready to do that. We're, of course, doing everything very safely. But yeah, it's exciting to be back and playing. I never really stopped. I play at home every few days. I sit down and practice. Prior to the pandemic, I was practicing every day. So I'm kind of getting back to that now.
Great, yeah. And, for folks that maybe aren't as familiar with you, Aguankó did play here a few years back, and we were trying to bring you back, you said. But I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about, your background. Where did you come from? Where'd you grow up? And kind of those initial early years of getting into the music that you now play today. Tell us a little bit of that story.
Well, let me tell you about me first. I was born in Mexico, in the southern state of Oaxaca, which is on the southwest coast of the country, a few hours from Guatemala, just north, very south of Mexico. And that's an area that had a very strong, what we call tropical music there. A lot of that music is influenced by Cuban music. So the danzones, the cha-cha-chas, the mambos were a big thing, and I heard them ever since I was a very little baby. We moved to the US when I was around 10, and I still have gone back annually. It's sometimes every 2 years, but pretty much annually I go back to Mexico, and have always loved that music. So around that age, I started developing a deep interest in the music. I especially liked the rhythms and the drums. I was kind of like one of those people that watched the drummers and the bands and thought that was the cat's meow. I started learning, and first self-taught, and then I started finding teachers, and I was lucky enough to meet the great Armando Peraza, who worked with Santana for 20 some years, master drummer from Cuba, and he taught me a lot. And then I started meeting other drummers. And then I actually went to Cuba multiple times. I've been going there since 1982 when it was illegal to go there. But I went really, just to learn about the essence of these beautiful instruments called the conga drums. And I made annual trips, sometimes twice a year, and learned from the very best masters that were there. So like I say, I'm very, very lucky and blessed to have learned from them. I've been with a lot of bands. I've been on a lot of recordings. And in fact, it'll be almost exactly 10 years from when we're playing that we started this band. I picked the best musicians of the Detroit area that I knew. And the thing with Detroit musicians is that it is 10 deep at every position. There's some fantastic musicians on piano, on saxophone, on flute, on this, on that, on drums. So it was hard to pick, but I picked guys that I knew were reliable, guys that were wonderful musicians and have that star quality when they're on the stage. And certainly I put together a beautiful all-star band. And we've been playing ever since, and doing festivals and doing, nightclubs and seminars, and it's been a lot of fun. And we have 4 recordings. We're actually working on the 5th one now, and hopefully that will be out probably mid part of the year of 2022. Yeah.
Yeah. So what age were you when you got your first drum? I mean, the first one that was your own, you know, how old were you?
Oh boy. Well, I actually was banging on things in my mom's kitchen and on tables when I was a kid. So I get whacked on the head or in the hands quite a bit, but I kept doing it. It just resonated with me, no pun intended. I got my first drum when I was around 14. I got an old Mexican drum called La Playa, which is the beach. That's what it means. It was a two-tone wood drum, and it sounded great, and to me, anyways. And I've now graduated to custom-made drums like these and high-end drums, but it was an amazing experience to actually play a drum and try and coax the sounds out of the skin, you know. So
sure. Do you still have it? Do you know what happened to that first drum?
No, you know, I traded it in to buy some Valjays. Back in fact, I know when I did it was 1972, and it was a store on Woodward Avenue in Birmingham, Michigan. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, it's always fun to hear those stories from musicians because you always remember those, you know, first instruments and kind of where they ended up, and oftentimes that's what happens. You got to trade it in. You got to move up to the next thing, right? So that's
yeah. Well, you know, I am kind of an eBay junkie, and I look for similar drums, and I found a few of them, but none that looked exactly like mine. I guess if I ever got one, I'm going to snag it.
Yeah. So do you play other instruments besides, and I know you probably play a lot of different kinds of drums, but are there other instruments that you have played over the years?
Yes, I play the bongos. I play the guiro, which is a little like a gourd with serrated sides, and it makes like a different kind of sound. You'll probably see one of those at the show. In fact, I know you will, because there's a couple of tunes that we are planning that have that sound. And it's mostly, I play percussion instruments, and then I play these hourglass-shaped drums called bata drums that are played in Cuba, a set of 3. Yeah, but I don't play other instruments. I do compose on the piano, but I wouldn't say that I'm a piano player.
Sure. And piano, of course, is considered sometimes as a percussion instrument, right? Because it has that sort of element of plucking or banging on the strings, and
Absolutely.
People think of it as other, yeah. Well, that's great. And I wanted to get a little bit more into your interest and background in Cuban music specifically. And if you could give us kind of some, maybe for folks who know very little about the differences, but what are some things that kind of differentiate Cuban jazz or Cuban music specifically from maybe other similar sounding kinds of music?
Yeah, well, first of all, the presence of these instruments, but you know, a conga drum, you can hear it in rock, you can hear it in pop music. Now it's a very common thing, but it didn't used to be. Remember that these instruments are, even though they were invented, these tunable drums were invented in Cuba, they are instruments that came from the African diaspora. When people were enslaved in Africa and brought to the New World, they brought, of course, they didn't bring drums, but what they brought was the rhythmic knowledge. And then they created instruments. The initial instruments in Cuba, for example, you know, the slaves you know, the people that were enslaved were not allowed to play drums because the slave owners thought that the Africans communicated with the drums, which actually was true. They could communicate. But what they did is in that part of history, when you know, the Spaniards were running the show in Cuba, they very soon found that there were some delicious fish all around the island of Cuba. So they would salt them and, you know, pack them in salt and send them back to Spain where they were the rage. People loved them. But they were packed in crates. And the Africans soon found that when they turned the crates over, they would play them and they would sound just like drums. And so they could continue that oral tradition that they remembered from Africa and translate the sound of drums onto those wooden boxes. And in fact, in Cuba, they are still playing wooden boxes in certain types of music, especially some religious music and also in secular music. So eventually these drums came to be. Tuning was invented sort of for these drums in Cuba. And now they're played. The other thing is that our music has authentic Cuban rhythms. There's a variety of them. There is a cha-cha-cha, mambo, danzón, Aguankó. There's a dozen of them at least. And we play a variety of those rhythms just to enhance the mood of the music. But all the musicians that I'm using are hardcore jazz musicians, most of them bebop. And it makes a wonderful confluence of two different branches of that tree of, the African diaspora plus the European diaspora that's settled in this part of the world.
Yeah, it's great. Would you mind maybe demonstrating some of those rhythms for us there on the congas?
So first of all, let me remind people that these are not called bongos. Bongos are smaller instruments. These are congas. And there are three of them. And they're tuned differently. As a rule, the three are called congas. Of the congas, the lowest tuned one is called the tumba or tumbadora. Very low. The second one is called the conga. And the highest one, which tends to be the solo drum, is called the quinto. So this has a higher pitch. Each of those genres of music has its own rhythm that's associated with it. For example, a ballad, also called in Latin music a bolero, is played slower because, of course, it's romantic and it's meant for dancing. Sounds like this. A cha-cha-cha, which is a little faster, it's also meant for dancing, but it's a little more lively, is like this. A mambo, you've heard of mambos. They're a little faster. They're also meant for dancing, but the dancing is faster and more, how can I say it, more intricate. So it goes like this. Sometimes it's played with 3 drums. And then there's a street rhythm called a Aguankó, which is played in the streets of Havana, Matanzas, and many other parts of Cuba. And they are basically just drums, sometimes claves, and singers. And it goes like this. So we'll be playing all those rhythms. Don't forget, of course, that there are other instruments playing behind them and different patterns on the timbales, which is what our percussionists will be playing. And piano also has different stylistic changes in what they do. So it is an interesting thing to hear how those things all fit together to give you the experience of listening to that genre of music.
Great. So we'll follow up. The next part is just talking a little bit about advice that you've received maybe as a musician, and maybe advice that you'd like to share with, younger musicians. And it could be, real young, but it could also just be, folks that are, college age and getting into it, and just kind of some things you're thinking about when you talk to those folks.
Well, first of all, I've learned the easy way and the hard way that there's no such thing as innate talent. There's innate aptitude, but there's not innate talent. Anything worthwhile has to be worked at, which means that you have to make time to sit down and practice your instrument, practice your craft, learn all you can about those who are, who you consider better than you, and try and always hang around with musicians who are better than you. You'll learn a lot. The other thing is to always keep your mind and your spirit sort of healthy, and always think of yourself as a student. Don't ever say, okay, I'm there, I'm the guy, I'm the best, because there's never such a thing. arguably one of the greatest conga players, Giovanni Hidalgo, is considered the best. And whenever I see him, he's practicing. I mean, there was a time when he was a young man that he was practiced 12 or 13 hours a day. And when you hear his blazing speed and his clean tone and all his great ideas, they all come from hard work and practice, because you get into a part of yourself where you become very creative within the confines of that instrument.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are some great pieces of advice, and I think they apply to a lot of other things other than just musicianship, right? Just anything in life, practicing it and learning as much as you can. Always be a learner and be open to new things. I think that those are some great pieces of advice for folks to take with them. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the show coming up January 8th. What kinds of songs you have kind of working out? I know you've got some new material coming up, so just talk a little bit about what people might see when they come.
Well, interestingly, yes, as you said, we have new material that we've only played a few times, but it will be well practiced and it will sound good when we get there. The concept of the new album will be, and I have a concept for each album. Just for a minute of a little self-serving ad. Our first album is called Elemental, and it was, I think of the elements, what make up something, like the beginning stage of anything. So that was our first album. Our second album was Invisible, which talks about the invisible forces that move us. And so once you know what the solid parts are, then you think about what kind of magic comes from that. So that's the progression in my mind of making these albums. The third one is called Pattern Recognition, which is, what do you do with that? How do you recognize what you're going to do and what you're thinking of? And then the last one was a Latin jazz Christmas album, Christmas in Havana, which was made really because we had the idea to take all the beautiful Christmas tunes that are being played and play them a little differently as Latin jazz. So that's an interesting thing. The next album, I haven't figured out the name yet, but I've written some tunes. I'll give you the example of one of them. It's called kintsugi. Now, kintsugi is a Japanese word for an art, where if you break a pot or a cup, you glue it together, but what you use is gold to put the pieces together. So what you get is, instead of this smooth form, you get a form with lines through it, with fractures, but the fractures have gold to hold them together. And so that increases the value of that. And if you think about it, it's kind of like humanity. We split up, we break up, we get angry, bad things happen, but it's the gold that brings our parts together that makes us more valuable and more experienced. So I wrote this very cool Latin jazz tune that we're going to perform there, along with some of the newer tunes. I also wrote a piece for a friend who died a year and a half ago, another fellow percussionist, died from complications of COVID, and a wonderful human being and great friend. We had long late night conversations about music and about the art of drumming. And I miss him dearly, but I wrote a tune for him. I wrote a tune about the Detroit Renaissance Mambo. I wrote a tune, I've got a lot of cool tunes this time out, and the musicians are excited about performing them, and they love to perform new music and to tweak it so that it bends to their will a little bit, because each of those guys has their own take on that music. And I love that. I try not to control what they do. I just give them the raw material and they create beautiful music with it. So for example, I don't tell the saxophone player what kind of solo to play. I figure he's a saxophone player. He's going to figure out the best solo or the best way to express that music. And so it's very collaborative. Even though I write a lot of the music, our saxophone player has a couple of pieces that we're going to perform. His name is Russ Miller. And, a lot of the arrangements are done by the bass player, Pat Prouty, or by the saxophone player. So it is a true collaborative and sort of a show, and it's a brotherhood, and we want to present that. And at the beginning of each tune, I'll tell you what genre of music it is and maybe speak for a minute about what it is so that people understand it.
That's great. I mean, That's jazz, right?
Yes.
It's meant to be collaborative. It's meant to have each person bringing their piece to the party and kind of putting it out there. So that's great. And I love the idea of sort of themes to each album. And
Yeah.
you know, a lot of the programming we do here is thematic, so it fits right in with the way we think and operate. Where can people find your music? So whether it's online or if they want to buy it, you know.
Yeah, they can go to our website, www.aguankó.com. You can buy the CDs right from there. I'll mail them right to your home. I'll even sign them for you. It's okay. But we'll have some at the show. We'll bring some music and it will be available there. You know, as far as the music is concerned, you're absolutely right. You know, if we had a situation where somebody's talking nonstop and the other person can't get a word in edgewise, it's no fun, right? For either of them. So, you know, my thinking is let's have that kind of band where even though I'm the leader, I'm the guy organizing the jobs and getting the guys together and telling them what kind of a place it's, what kind of a venue it's going to be. You know, they show up with their own artillery and they do what they do the best because that's their instrument and that's how their minds work. One more thing about writing that tune, Kintsugi. You know, I see that we've had a very fractured society and a very fractured world right now as far as ideology. And I just think that, well, I like to think that music is the gold that puts us all back together to be a more valuable and more whole experience in this life that we're living now.
Yeah, that's a great sentiment to kind of end our conversation on, Alberto. And I want to thank you for spending a few minutes with us and sharing some information about your music and your background that we'll be able to share. And looking forward to seeing you in a little while here for the show in January. Again, January 8th, Aguankó. Make sure you get your tickets there at denosmuseum.org. Thanks so much for being with us, Alberto.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful experience working with you guys. And we can't wait to be back there and see the wonderful people of Traverse City and surrounding areas. So thank you.